All right, let's jump right in. We're going to talk about a document that literally tried to remake the world, a promise of liberty, equality, and fraternity.
So, what are we looking at here? This is it, the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. It was forged in the fire of the French Revolution back in August of 1789. And wow, was it a radical vision for its time. You can still see its DNA, its influence, in democratic constitutions pretty much everywhere you look today.
But here's the thing. For all its amazing, grand ideals, you have to remember this document was a product of its time. It was a promise made by some people, for some people. And that gets us to the big question we're going to tackle. What did all this talk of rights actually mean in reality? And maybe more importantly, who exactly got left out when they used the word man?
To really get how mind-blowing this document was, you've got to picture the world it was born into. Think about it. Pre-revolutionary France was a kingdom built entirely on privilege. You had the king, who ruled by so-called divine right, meaning he answered only to God. Then you had the aristocracy and the clergy, who had all these special perks. And then there was, well, pretty much everyone else, who had very few rights at all.
And then bam, the Declaration comes along and flips that whole system on its head. And it does it with one incredibly powerful idea: popular sovereignty. Article 3 says all power comes from the nation. You know what that means? It means the right to rule doesn't come from God, it doesn't come from your fancy bloodline, it comes from the people. This wasn't just a new idea, it was a direct attack on the very concept of monarchy.
So, okay, if the king's power isn't from God anymore, what's the foundation of this new nation going to be? Let's dig into the core promises of the Declaration itself. And it's pretty cool. It was drafted with input from some big names like the Marquis de Lafayette, you know, the guy who helped out in the American Revolution, and even his friend Thomas Jefferson.
Article I. This is the big one, the cornerstone, and its power is just how simple and direct it is. It's like a battering ram smashing right into that entire old system of aristocratic privilege. In just one sweeping sentence, it declared that your worth isn't about who your parents were. It's simply about being human. And this right here, this article redefines what government is even for. Its job isn't to rule you. Its job is to protect these fundamental rights. And check out that last one, resistance against oppression. Wow. I mean, for a bunch of people in the middle of overthrowing their king, that's not just some abstract philosophical idea. That's them writing their own justification right into the rulebook.
Then Article 6 comes along and starts building the new social structure on top of that foundation. It lays down two huge, game-changing principles. First, equality before the law, no more special courts for nobles. And second, a true meritocracy. Public jobs should go to the most talented people, not the ones with the right last name. This was a vision for a country run on ability, not ancestry.
Okay, so this all sounds amazing, right? A total game changer. But, and this is a big but, this is where the beautiful vision smacks right into a very complicated reality. You see, the Declaration keeps talking about man and all citizens in these universal terms. So did they really mean everyone? Well, the revolutionaries themselves pretty quickly decided that the answer was nope, not at all.
Almost immediately, the new Constitution split people into two groups: active citizens and passive citizens. To be active, to get the full package with the right to vote, you had to tick a lot of boxes. You had to be a man, you had to be French, you had to be at least 25, pay a certain amount in taxes, and you couldn't be a servant. And the result of all that? Well, it's pretty staggering. Out of 29 million people, only about 4.3 million actually qualified. So what about everyone else? Women, the poor, foreigners, enslaved people, they were all passive. Sure, the law protected them, but they had absolutely no say in making it.
Now, people didn't just sit back and accept this. Oh no. In 1791, an amazing playwright named Olympe de Gouges basically said, hold on a minute, and published her own version, the Declaration of the Rights of Women. She completely called out the hypocrisy. And in that very same year, a massive revolt of enslaved people erupted in the French colony of Saint-Domingue. They heard the words liberty and took them seriously, sparking the Haitian Revolution. All of this while powerful pro-slavery groups back in Paris like the Club Massiac were fighting tooth and nail to maintain the brutal status quo.
These exclusions weren't just some oversight. They weren't an accident. They were hammered out in some incredibly fierce debates. I mean, every single word in the Declaration was fought over in thousands of speeches. And what's really cool is that a recent analysis of over 40,000 of those speeches gives us this incredible inside look. We can actually see a hidden dynamic, a peek into how the very language of revolution was being created in real time.
So what did the researchers find?
something they call an innovation bias. Basically, the entire National Assembly wasn't just chewing over old ideas. The system itself was tilted. It was fundamentally biased toward picking up new ways of talking and new ways of thinking. The revolution, it seems, was literally hardwired to embrace novelty. And you can see this bias playing out along clear political lines. On one side, you had the left-wing speakers, guys like the super radical Robespierre. They were the innovators. They were always bringing new language to the table, new ways of speaking that broke from the past. And on the other side, you had the conservative right-wing speakers, like Abbé Mari. They acted as, well, inertial dampeners is a great way to put it. Their strategy wasn't just to argue against new ideas, but to try and conserve the conversation itself, to resist that drift towards radical new language.
So we're left with this fascinating puzzle, right? A document that makes these huge universal claims about human rights, but at the same time is built on very specific, very deep exclusions. So that brings us to the final piece, its legacy. How on earth did these ideals, even with all their flaws, end up having such a massive ripple effect through history?
Let's just take one example, Article 10. It's a pretty simple line, really, just protecting people's opinions, including their religious views. But that one line, it laid the entire foundation for what we think of as modern secularism. The point wasn't to be against religion. The point was that the state's job was to protect your individual freedom of conscience. It created this idea of a public space where people of all faiths and no faith could stand as equal citizens.
And you can literally draw a straight line from 1789 all the way to today. The ideals in that declaration and, this is just as important, the powerful pushback against its failures, they went on to inspire generation after generation. It sparked Olympe de Gouges' feminist declaration, it fueled the Haitian Revolution's successful fight for independence, and eventually, it formed a core inspiration for the 1948 United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
And that leaves us with a really tough final thought, a challenging question. The Declaration gave the world this incredible new language for talking about freedom. But from the very beginning, that language left people out. So how do we do it? How do we celebrate these amazing universal ideals while also acknowledging the very real struggles of all the people who had to fight just to be counted as everyone? That tension? Well, that's still right at the very heart of the ongoing project of democracy.